Record now. Good morning, dearest friends. Today is Thursday, Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, which means it is the 18th of Iyar, the 19th of May, and we are gathered to study Talmud here on our alternate accounts, the whole Talmud, but today, Masechah Shabbos, chapter 16, page 117. We're going to get right to things, but first I want to mention today we are honoring the yahrzeit, we're observing the yahrzeit of our dear Reb Berel, one of the sages of our Talmud Chabura, whose mother's yahrzeit is today, Vittel Rachel Bas Yitzchak Halevi. Vittel Rachel Bas Yitzchak Halevi. Now I know why you're good friends with our dear Dr. the Levi, our doctors, the Levis, and Neshama Shavan Aliyah, her kids, her grandkids, and all generations should be blessed with an abundance of health and nachas.
She was lucky enough to have great grandchildren too.
And we're grateful that she put a wonderful son, a person who loves Torah and loves to probe the depths and to clarify the meanings of the Torah. And we're grateful to have Reb Berel on and to honor her yahrzeit. I just want to give a 10-second recap of yesterday's Gemara. I know it was one of the more confusing, complex segments of the Talmud. Long story short, our Mishnah. Our Mishnah talks about saving a Torah from the fire with its case, saving a tefillin from the fire with its case, and even if there's money inside of it, you save it nonetheless. There was a debate about the Korban Pesach, about when Erev Pesach, which is when the Korban Pesach is administered, is also Shabbos. Well, certain parts of the Korban Pesach administration had more to do with the Korban side. Other aspects had more to do with the eating, the people eating side. And so there's a machlokes. Of course, there's a waiver for Shabbos to administer the Korban Pesach. You can break Shabbos, so to speak, to slaughter, to process the Korban, just like in the temple, they were Korbanot brought on Pesach. The question that they were debating is, those waivers extend even to parts of the Pesach experience that were really only to accommodate and convenience the human component, the food, the meat component. Rabbi Yishmael, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, says, no, you only are permitted to do the aspects that are to facilitate the Korban heavens business, not man's. And the Chachamim meaning the Mishnah era sages who disagree with Rabbi Yishmael, say no. Once you're in business, once you're administering the Korban Pesach, once you're in the action of skinning, you can skin the entire animal. You can even transport it. There's an element of kavod to Hashem. And in making their point, they quote the halacha that's in our Mishnah. Just like you can save a Torah alongside its case, and even schlep money along, that proves that when you're in the act of doing when you're in the midst of doing a permitted act, the service, Kiddusha, Hashem, the Torah, well then, even if there is a byproduct that the human being might be convenienced, that's okay. The Gemara probes the analogy, both to understand if we were talking about a rabbinic problem or only a Torah problem or only a rabbinic problem. The Gemara also probes what exactly were the rabbis saying is permissible and Rabbi Yishmael was saying is forbidden. Initially, we say it was only a question of skinning. Then we say it's also a matter of muktzah. In the end, we say it was only a matter of skinning. It was a complex Gemara, but that's just, I guess, a small outline of what we discussed yesterday. I'm now going to share the screen, and we're going to jump into a new discussion. The subject at hand is something that we're not well versed with yet, but I downloaded some images to help us out as we navigate this new segment of the Gemara. Don't worry, it's not as intimidating as it sounds. We're just going to talk about a courtyard. What does it look like? 2 walls, 3 walls. Are there any lechis involved? And we'll use some pictures to help demonstrate, which reminds me that I should make sure our share is sharing this screen, not just this page. Okay, here we are.
Bye.
Our Mishnah says, I'm sorry, did someone say something? No. Our Mishnah says, you want to save, you need to save the Torahs, the tefillin from fire. Well, what environment are we saving it into? Rabbi Steinsaltz is going to give us an English translation of the rest of it, etc. And the Mishnah continues, into an alley that is closed. Into an alley that is closed. I think this is Rabbi Steinsaltz's commentary, which, if it is surrounded by three sides, is considered a private domain by Torah law. An alleyway, a mavoi she'eino mefulash, an alleyway that is not continuous with the public domain, which Rabbi Steinsaltz, for general simplicity, says it's surrounded by three sides. Then Beseira says even an open alley also you may carry and transport the Torah from a burning building into this kind of mavoi. So the Mishnah again describes what this situation is. The Hebrew words that you need to know: mifulash or mavo she'eino mifulash. A mavoi, alleyway, as Rabbi Steinsaltz translates, that's opened into the public or that is closed off. The Gemara is going to probe what exactly an open and closed alleyway is. Some of the proposals will be shocking, and some will be quite familiar, and some will be, well, let's see.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Practically, isn't the main concern to save as many Sefer Torahs as possible? You grab them, you take them out, you run back for more. I'm trying to figure out, why are they concentrating where you go with them?
Because the Mishnah is not, at this point, telling us that you can desecrate Shabbos to save a Torah. Mishnah is saying certain restrictions on saving items from fire are waived in the event that it is a Torah. And so we are probing when there is a license to save a Torah and when there might be a license. There might not be a license to save a Torah. There may be, I'm not saying for certain, but there may be scenarios where you have to let the items burn, as painful as it is. And this is not a halacha lemaisa assertion.
But Rabbi, the Mishnah is very clear. It doesn't say ma matzilin and ma losotitam. It says ma matzilin, period.
And then it says ulahechan matzilin. Where and when can it be saved? This again, this is not the settled fact of the discussion. This is the entry into the discussion. But the fact of the matter is that our Mishnah asks that question. The Mishnah goes there, as they might say. Here's our Mishnah. Again, let's look at it real fast on this side. Kol kitvei hakodesh matzilin otam pnei adleika. Ve'afal pi, this is last Mishnah, but anyways.
That's my point.
What's your point?
They say ma matzilin, period. They're not talking what they would have said. You have to save them and take them, whatever.
No, that's not what it says. Where can they be saved? Or from where to where may they be brought? Maybe you can't bring them somewhere. Let's not jump to a conclusion before we go through this the exploration. But a simple reading of the Mishnah at this point indicates that there may be restrictions. There may be times and places where you cannot save a Torah. Again, no.
Rabbi, there's something I don't understand here.
Yeah.
If a synagogue is burning down and there's a bunch of Sefer Torahs inside the synagogue,
yeah,
what are you supposed to do? Look for a place first and then try to save them, or try to save them and then look for the place?
So our Mishnah says a person would already know. Again, we're living in a time where people are highly attuned to the laws of Shabbos. A person is going to verify beforehand. The person knows where they live, and they know, oh, I live in X kind of arrangement, or this kind of neighborhood, or that kind of neighborhood. Remember one thing: if you have an Eruv in your community, all of this is academic. This is all talking about there is not an Eruv. The area is not enclosed in an Eruv. Actually, maybe it is. Maybe it's even talking about it is enclosed in an Eruv. Let me take that back. At the end of the sugya, because if you recall, there are different. This is why the study of Gemara is confusing, because it trickles down into halacha l'maisa. But if you recall, there were varying interpretations of if the restriction here is. Well, let's keep it simple. At this point,
Rabbi, maybe this discussion serves as a guidance where to build the synagogue. So there is a closed alleyway next to it, and you don't build it in just in open fields. Although in other places, we are talking about a situation where the synagogue is indeed in open fields, and we are discussing what to do when people come home late from the shul. So, no, I'm not sure that that's the right interpretation.
Possibly. I'm debating again. You have to start. You can't go to the conclusion every time before we start the process. But suffice it to say that at the close of this discussion, we will take a peek in the Shulchan Aruch and we'll review what we already read at the very beginning of this discussion, which is Lemaisa, how the Beit Yosef and the Ramah instruct their adherents, let's say, in regards to a fire on Shabbos. Are there any restrictions or not? Spoiler alert, in the language, I believe, of the Rambam, he says, even if there is no Eruv, you may save it so long as you follow the parameters of our Gemara. But again, based on those words, and we're going to look at it more exhaustively at the end, not every fire may be saved. Dr. Hammer will wisely remind us, first of all, if there's no way to do it safely, a human life is exponentially more valuable even than the most precious and large number of Torah scrolls. And that's important to bear in mind. And number two, halacha 2 may not give an absolute license to save a Torah. Can you put on a hose and put out a fire in order to save Torahs on Shabbos? The answer is no. The answer is no. To save a life, absolutely. But if it's just to save a Torah, the answer is no. And so there are restrictions to the ability to save a Torah. We can juxtapose this with the current events, which is that in Tallahassee, there was a fire at the Chabad on the school. What is it? UCF? No, that's Orlando. I don't remember what anyways, the school, there's a Chabad house in Tallahassee that serves the college students. And this fire wasn't on Shabbos, it was on a Saturday night. And unfortunately, there are at least 2 Torahs there that were burned, which is a great tragedy in the Jewish tradition. But anyways, let's go back to our Gemara.
Unfortunately, Rabbi, today, every day you have the situation in the Ukraine.
What do you mean?
I mean, they're bombing, a missile falls on the shul, there's still a Sefer Torah there, fires.
I don't know how many shuls we know that have been bombed out. There have been shuls. I know in Kharkov, for example, they know that there was damage, but I don't know yet. I unfortunately will know after the war.
I saw one yesterday from Mariupol, whatever.
That the shul was bombed out?
Yeah.
Or unfortunately, Mariupol, I think the whole city was practically destroyed.
I'm sure all those Sefer Torahs were put somewhere in a safe place.
Hopefully.
Anyways, but let's go into our Gemara a little bit. So the Mishnah says, where can you take the Torahs? You're taking it out of the shul. And by the way, we're assuming this is a shul. Our Mishnah makes no reference to a shul. It's equally probable that a person might have had his personal Torahs in his home. As we know, the final mitzvah in the Torah is to write a Sefer Torah. And at a time where there were very limited books, Torah books, I don't think the average person had a Torah scroll, but I just want to clarify, the Mishnah doesn't explicitly reference a shul versus a home. And on the contrary, the arrangement here, the Mishnah doesn't talk much about a shul at all in this segment. So anyways, it could be in a home, it could be in a shul, it could be in an office. So the Gemara wants to know a much more basic, fundamental question. When the Mishnah talks about a closed and open alleyway, what makes an alleyway open and what makes an alleyway closed? Now, not knowing anything, I would say, well, an alleyway that has a gate on the front end and the back end, it's entirely enclosed, that must be a closed alleyway. That would be a mavo she'ino mefulash. It's not open. And an open alleyway would be one that has no gate or one gate missing. But that's, of course, not the parameters that our Gemara the Mishnah seems to be considering. So let's take a look. Amar Rav Chisda says, you want to know what? A non-open alleyway would be shalosh mechitzot, 3 walls enclosed, ushnei lechayin, and 2 lechis, 2 posts on the open side of the alleyway. Zehu mavoy she'ino mefulash. This would be what I would classify, says Rav Chisda, a closed alleyway, a non-open alleyway. What does this two lechis look like? So Rashi says, "Lepesach she'ein lo mechitza." The open side has two posts. I'm going to share with you now the images that I found online on Aldaf, which is a wonderful website. Here we go. Rav Chisda, mifulash, open, only has one lechi. Right over there. Eino mifulash, a closed one, has three walls. You see the picture?
Yes.
And then you have these two posts, which are these nice blue color, somewhat delineating the space of a fourth wall. Now is not really going to be the time to talk in depth about the function of the lechi, but suffice it to say it is a representation or a symbolic of a conceptual closure, or at least delineating the space over there.
So can the lechi be?
I'm
Does it
sorry.
have to be a post? I said the lechi. Does it have to be a post, or can it be a bush or a tree?
It could be, but there are very specific parameters and dimensions necessary. I'd rather stay away from going into all the intricacy now, because we'll have much ink spilled on all the intricacies later on in the Gemara.
I'm waiting for someone to ask a question about a Carmelite.
Carmelis, stand by. Look out.
It's coming.
So Rav Chisda says, Shalosh mechitzot u'shnei lechayin. A closed mavoi has three walls. It's enclosed on three sides, and on the open side there are two posts indicating the fourth wall. Zeho mavoi sheino mefulash. Rashi, kiloimar. Mavoi hanitar b'chol hilchotav. This is a mavoi which is entirely mutter to carry there. Bein be'erov, bein b'shar dvarim, whether we're talking about an erov or all other matters. B'chol heter shar mivoot. Yesh lo kegen shetufim mivoot. Basically, there are many halachot. This is the ideally enclosed mavoi. Rashi referencing a number of matters that are not yet on the table. Now, shalosh mechitzot v'lechi achad, if it has three walls, but only one post, zehu mavoi hamfulash. This is the mavoi that's not entirely enclosed. It is somewhat open. That is a mavo hamifulash, an open mavoi. Why is the Gemara so keen in giving an interpretation to mavoi mifulash and mavoi sheino mifulash? Simple, because the Mishnah, which I really should open another tab, I'll do that now. Our Mishnah has a machlokes about where you can save something into. One opinion is mavoi mifulash, and one is mavoi sheino mifulash. Just to read the language of the Mishnah here. Lehechan matzilin lemavoi sheino mifulash. You save it into a mavoi that's not open. And Ben Beseira says af mifulash. So when the Gemara or Rav Chisda gives a definition that eino mifulash means three walls and one lechi, well, according to Ben Beseira, you're allowed to carry even if there's only one post. According to the Chachamim, only if there's two posts. Oh, wow. I'm already getting a notice of a 10-minute warning. Can you all see that, or only I can see it? You can see it, I hope. Okay. So, this is Rav Chisda telling us, Mavoi mefulash, Mavoi sheino mefulash, an unopened, meaning a closed Mavoi. Everybody agrees you can carry the Torahs from the house into there. And according to Ben Beseira, you can even, if there's even only one post, you can still carry from the burning building into there. V'tarvayu, both sages of the Mishnah, Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer, are using the framework introduced to us by Rabbi Eliezer of the laws of a mavoi that you're allowed to carry into and a mavoi that you cannot carry into. Ditanan, take a look at this Mishnah. Hechsher mavoi, what makes a mavoi workable? What makes a mavoi workable for the purposes of for the purposes of Shabbos. So Beis Shammai says lechi v'kaira, you need to have a post and also a beam across. Beis Hillel oimrim oy lechi oy kaira. Beis Hillel says you need either a side post or a beam across. Rabbi Eliezer oimer and Rav Chisda, who's quoting Rabbi Eliezer, says shnei lechayim. You need to have two lechis to make a mavoi enclosed. And so Rav Chisda here is following the framework of Rabbi Eliezer. Shnei lechayim means that it is closed. One lechi, it is unclosed. This is the understanding of our Mishnah according to Rav Chisda. Does everybody agree with Rav Chisda? Obviously not. Let's read Rashi really fast. Tarayu. Rabbanan uben Beseira, both opinions quoted in our Mishnah. Sfira lo Rabbi Elazar, follow Rabbi Elazar's framework. The Amar ein mavai. Va'afilu sasam nitar. A mavai, even if it's closed, is only permissible. Balachi echad va'ashmina ben Beseira. Ba'atzalas kisvei hakodesh le'beina l'chaim ki Rabbi Elazar. So Beseira says, in an emergency scenario, we don't need to follow the regular stringent position of Rabbi Elazar. Not everybody agrees with Rav Chisda. Amalei Rabba. Rabba calls out Rav Chisda and says, Shalosh mechitzos, v'lechi echad. Imagine a mavai, 3 walls and a post. It's pretty close to closed. Mifulash, karitle. Does this get properly defined as an open mavai? Rashi, hinami debayir b'lazar l'chaim. Mimufulish mikri. It may be missing a post. To be really enclosed, maybe it's lacking a post. But this certainly cannot be what the sages mean when they talk about an open mavai. It's pretty closed. According to the Chachamim, surely even this kind of mavai is closed enough that you could save food into it. It should be entirely permissible to carry with the parameters you're describing. Therefore, Rabbah rejects Rav Chisda's interpretation. And he says, you know what? Shtei mechitzos u'shnei lechayim, if it only has 2 walls and 2 lechis, we'll take a look at a picture in a moment. Zem mavoi sheino mefulash, this would be an enclosed and non-open mavoi. Shtei mechitzos v'lechi echad zem mavoi mefulash. And what's this open mavoi that is pretty strict, pretty problematic? Then Beseira allows you to carry into it. The Chachamim don't. That's going to be if there's 2 walls and 1 lechi. Let's take a look at the picture so we can be clear. Rabbah's position, and this probably rings more true to our imagination. A mavoi, an alleyway, a passageway that connects different courtyards of homes. According to Rabbah, mifulash means it's got 2 walls and an open mavoi has only 1 post. And a closed mavoi is not really closed, but symbolically it has 2 lechis. It has 2 lechis, one on one side and one on the other, symbolically representing the missing walls as if there is an enclosure of sorts. It's symbolically blocking it in. This is the viewpoint of Rabbah. So again, when our Mishnah says you can save a Torah, or when everyone says you can save a Torah into a mavoi, according to Rabbah, we're talking about this picture right over here. It's open with just 2 posts.
Rabbi,
Here says, you know what? I am so passionate about saving Torahs from the fire, I will even allow you to carry into a mavoi that's open, only 1 post. Yes?
about the picture, in the previous discussion, I assumed that 2 posts mean that they are at the same side of the alley and they create like a symbolic gates. But on this picture, I see those posts on 2 sides, opposing sides of the alley, and they don't even create a symbolic gate.
So first of all, I don't know. You're correct. It doesn't create a symbolic gate, but it symbolically creates a protrusion on each of the 4 sides.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you the truth. I want to avoid this discussion partially because of the lack of my perfect clarity on all the intricacies of. So it's not just that I'm trying to avoid it, but I want to comprehensively explore the laws of the lechis and the mavos when we get there. For now, I'll just take the picture at face value, notwithstanding your comment, which is well taken. And I have the same question. So it's a good point. So that's Rabbah's interpretation of the Mishnah. Now I want to scramble because we have like 3 minutes left till they knock us off. So I want to see the third interpretation of our Mishnah. Oh, I'm sorry. When Rabbah says that we're talking about 2 full walls and then a post or 2, Tarvaya Oliba de Rabbi Yehuda. They both follow the viewpoint of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Yes, sir. Al Kain Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda further explained. Misha yesh leishnei batim, v'shnei tzidei rishus harabim. If you have 2 homes across from each other in rishus harabim, you could be allowed to carry from one to the other if oisalechi mikan v'lechi mikan. If you put a post on one side of the street and one side of the other street, oikar mikan v'kar mikan v'noisa v'noisa me'emtza. You can symbolically but also halachically enclose a rishus harabim and create a conceptual mavoi between 2 homes. Remember, 2 homes are 2 walls, kind of like what we're imagining here. Amr Loi, the sages tell him, no, ein marvin rishus harabim bekach. This is not going to work. But Rabbi Yehuda says it does work. So just to go back to the picture, even though we may risk not seeing the third viewpoint now, Rabbi Yehuda says, if this is one home, this is another home, they both have walls, we can turn them into an enclosed space conceptually, halachically, by placing a post on one side and the other side. And Professor, your question rings even more strongly to me, because I also have that question based on the reading of that brisa, but we'll leave the question hanging just for now. Rashi, the Amar b'shnei mechitzas sagi shnei l'chayim v'asam b'meseir l'meimar d'legabe sefer Torah by Rabbi Yehuda. And Meseir is even more lenient, and he's saying that Rabbi Yehuda would be even more lenient than usual in the case of a fire. Amar le Abaya disagrees. He challenges Rabbah and says, "L'didach nami." The way you describe it, with the 2 walls and 2 posts, should the rabbis allow anything to be taken out of there? And the reality is that our Mishnah describes, let me read our Steinsaltz. All right, okay. According to the way you're explaining it, should food and drink be allowed to be saved in there? Rav Ashi therefore gives a third interpretation. If there's 3 walls and 1 post, this is an enclosed mavoi. 3 walls without any post, even according to Rabbi Lazar, who says you need to have posts, and that's with matters that are a little more mundane, like food and drink. There, Rabbi Lazar says to be enclosed, you need to add a post. Aval a sefer Torah. When it comes to the matter of a sefer Torah, 1 post is enough. And this is a third way to understand the debate between the Chachamim. Again, we have different opinions about what an open and closed mavoi is. We are endeavoring to apply and understand what the sages of our Mishnah must have been referring to. Rav Ashi seems to have the most, not radical, but inconsistent perspective, but he explains, no, an open mavoi is 0 lechis, but even 3 walls, but 0 lechi, but even 1 lechi would be enough to symbolically enclose it for the purposes of saving a sefer Torah. And so at a peripheral reading, what we have here, and I'm summarizing because we're going to get bounced off in a second, is our Mishnah talks about how you can save a Torah, what the conditions must be on the ground. We have 3 sages of the Gemara.